probably picked the worst possible week of the year to do it. It's just the way my schedule worked out. And I would not recommend doing this in July for anyone else thinking about it. The weather was a big challenge. So there was like record setting flooding and rain that happened while we were out there. And that meant all the water levels were rising in these rivers. So it was actually 2 times that we had to shimmy across a log. I mean, it was crazy. I said to my friend, like, you got to take a picture of this because no one's going to believe what we're doing out here.
Hello and welcome to the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. I'm Craig Lewis, and the voice you just heard was that of Kim Levinsky, one of our favourite people on the show. She was talking about the crazy conditions she faced in traversing almost 400 miles along the long path. Back in April, I spoke to Kim as she prepared to take on the 358-mile-long trail, which runs from New York City, across the Catskills, and all the way to Albany. Kim, who's a veteran of the Tahoe 200, was aiming to set a fastest known time along the long path for a female-supported runner. And in July, she did it. So we had to catch up with her and find out exactly what happens along the way. I caught up with Kim to find out how she overcame everything from early niggling injuries and having to shimmy across logs to cross over rivers to wet feet and unexpected dogs, and how and why her crew was so important in getting her through everything. I started our conversation by asking how it felt to complete such a huge challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Craig, for having me on. It's good to be back chatting with you. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It happened, and still trying to process everything that went down out there. It was an incredible, wild experience on the trail.
So I suppose first question for people who maybe don't follow you on Instagram or other places is kind of how did it go? What kind of time? And obviously we're talking in days here. What sort of time did you manage to get around in?
Yeah, so finished in 9 days, 10 hours, right on the dot. It was about, my watch registered 378 miles. The path is officially 358. So who knows if I got some bonus miles in there. Elevation was around, my watch was like 72,000 feet of gain over the course of the 9.5 days. So yeah, it felt like forever and also very fast at the same time, kind of a time warp out there.
Yeah, and I know there were plenty of challenges and experiences along the way, but the first question I kind of want to ask is how did you feel in the end, both mentally and also physically? How's the body holding up?
Yeah, well, this is now we're a few weeks after it finished, so I'm feeling okay. I've been out doing a couple of short runs, trying to walk a lot, getting back in the gym a little bit, but definitely a lot of fatigue when we finished. A lot of exhaustion at the end, but overall it was really it was incredible. I'm so happy with how it went and just the overall experience that I got to have with my friends out there.
And mentally, what was it like? Because I'm sure there was the huge explosion of happiness at the end of it, but quite often these massive challenges can then end up with a bit of a mental fatigue afterwards and a bit of emptiness.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels much different than Tahoe 200 last year. I feel like Tahoe ended and it was like this plummet into just feeling kind of, there's a big hole and trying to process everything. This time it's odd. I feel like I'm still trying to just understand and work through everything that went on out there because it was such a huge experience. Yeah, a little bit disconnected in some ways, but I feel like as each day goes on, just talking with friends about what happened and, reliving some of the memories through sharing them online, it's been pretty cool to kind of remember everything that went down.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about the kind of disconnect and almost the feeling that, I know I did this amazing thing, but also, was it really me who did that amazing thing?
Yeah, that's probably, you actually verbalize that really well. That's a lot of what I'm feeling right now, which probably sounds crazy to people listening because obviously I was out there doing it, but it's a weird, strange feeling. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's interesting.
I've heard it quite a few times from people who do sort of incredible long runs and so on, that they either feel a little bit empty afterwards, or even I was speaking to Grayson Murphy, who is a world mountain racing champion, and it took her 4 years to come to terms to realize that she was a world champion, until until the second time she'd won it for her actually to go, hey, I actually did this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had, I'm a race director, so we had an event this past weekend, and it was fun because I haven't seen a lot of folks since the long path ended, so just getting to chat with them. But yeah, it's an interesting thing because everyone's congratulating me, really excited, and it's cool. It's emotional to share that with people, but there is that odd feeling of like, I know I did it, but it feels I'm still trying to process all of it.
And there was certainly a lot of interesting, exciting things on there. People definitely need to check your Instagram out to have a look at some of the experiences you had. The most recent one I saw actually was about how great it was to have your cheerleaders, your support squad with you dancing along the long path, but also helping you through quite a hard time, because you picked up some sort of injuries, or at least niggles, fairly early in the whole experience, didn't you?
Yeah, that was really unexpected. I've since learned that that should have been expected. And thankfully, I was surrounded by friends who are very experienced ultra runners. And that's what they kept telling me was, this is normal. And many people who go out for these multi-day hikes, like the first 1 to 2 days, it's just your body is freaking out with what's happening. Because I knew, like, logically, I knew I'm not injured. I'm trained for this. I did strength training. I haven't had IT band problems in over a year. But it's really hard when it happens, 30, 40 miles into something that's going to take over a week. And it's hard to keep the brain in check. That's why, I'm so thankful for the friends who were there, because it was just continual. Every time I try to like project out to even, 20 miles ahead, let alone like days ahead, they would just immediately bring it back to, okay, but we're here in this mile, we're doing this segment, and we're going to get to the next checkpoint, and then we're going to go to the next one, and then the next one. So that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, to bore people with a cricket analogy, which half of the world won't have a clue what I'm talking about, but I'll give it a go anyway. When you're kind of chasing down a huge total of 200, 300, 400 runs, or whatever, you tend to try and break it down into really small numbers, like 10 runs. We'll just get the next 10 runs. We'll just get the next 10, and they add up. And it sounds like it's that similar experience for yourself and for other endurance runners when they're out there. It's, let's just get this next tiny little bit over, live through this bit, and we won't worry about the fact that there's 7-8 days to go.
Yeah, once I was finally able to make that switch, I struggled through the whole thing, but it felt like it took, I was thinking back yesterday, it was over 140 miles for my brain to finally get fatigued enough from those like mental gymnastics of like freaking out and then calming down. Finally, after it was like 3 days, I think my brain just gave up and was like, okay, now we're just going to focus on the next 10 miles till we see crew again. So it's interesting. Like the brain is, everyone says it's so powerful. It was really, the mental side of it was wild out there.
And another thing that your brain had to cope with was the random arrival of farm dogs. When you're not that even though they were very, or this particular dog looked very friendly, it's not something which you're particularly a fan of, I think.
I know, I'm not a dog person, so we met a few dogs out there, and the beginning, the first 100 miles, it's very very remote, very rural, so it's common for these farm dogs to be running around. And the funny one I posted online was, we passed this dog who at the same time, I just happened to be eating a piece of bacon, and this dog comes bounding out of the farm and is, jumping all over. And I was a little scared because I'm, not into dogs, but my pacer, Ryan, grabbed him, and we found out he was very friendly. The dog's name was Leo, and he followed us for probably a quarter mile looking for more bacon. So yeah. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, he looked like he would have run the entire long path if there'd been bacon available all the way.
I think so.
And interesting, again, talking about the paces there. One of the other things I noticed in terms of them helping you was I think one of your paces was showing you techniques for getting across some of the unusual terrain, including sort of
Oh my
shimmying
God.
across logs and things like that, which just looked, well, to me, it just looked frightening, let alone anything else.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, that was a huge part of the long path was probably picked the worst possible week of the year to do it. It's just the way my schedule worked out. And I would not recommend doing this in July for anyone else thinking about it. The weather was a big challenge. So there was like record setting flooding and rain that happened while we were out there. And that meant all the water levels were rising in these rivers. So it was actually 2 times that we had to shimmy across a log. I mean, it was crazy. I said to my friend, like, you got to take a picture of this because no one's going to believe what we're doing out here.
Yeah, and for people who haven't seen the Instagram, this was literally just a log placed either end on each side of a river, and quite a drop. So it wasn't a simple thing, and it wasn't running either.
Yeah, and it was also like 11 o'clock at night, so pitch black, and yeah, that's why I'm so thankful for my friends who were out there because they had a few more brain cells than I did. So, you know, they, in all seriousness, my friends who were there, they really kept me safe in situations there were some really sketchy, dangerous things. So I was thankful to be with friends who were competent and were just keeping me safe on the trails.
And one of the things we spoke about previously on the previous podcast during your training was, you know, you did an awful lot of training runs out there to sort of get yourself ready for it, to get used to the terrain. I mean, ultimately, are there enough training runs in the world to get used to a run like that?
I don't know how you can really mimic something like that instead of, I mean, what I did, I think was very helpful. I told my friends when I was out there, it was like a blessing and a curse to have previewed so much of the trail. I think I was able to see about 230 or 40 miles of the whole thing this past year. So it was good in the sense that I knew what was coming, but then also not good in the sense that I knew what was coming in some parts. I think one of the most challenging sections was through the park called Harriman State Park. And due to those storms, the Parks Department they've closed those parks to the public. And that was a whole nother side of this. Was halfway through, we didn't think we were going to be able to finish because of these trail closures. But thanks to the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, Ken Posner's connected with them. My friend Don Weiss, he spoke with Palisades Park Commission, and they gave us special permission to go through the park. So that was one of those situations where I knew where we were, and we were coming up on this road that was about to dead end, and then we would hit the trails. And I just knew what was coming with those trails are challenging to begin with. And then just knowing that, well, they've closed these to the public, so it really must be pretty gnarly in there. So there was that kind of anticipation. But overall, I mean, I'm super happy that I got to see a lot of the trails because it was definitely helpful and helpful for crew to be able to give them specific details with, you know, where to meet and how long estimations the trails would take.
So as you're like heading along there and you're feeling injured early on, or you're shimmering across rogs and parts of the park are being closed and no doubt everything's aching and you're feeling tired, was there any stage where you either thought, why on earth am I doing this? Or even sort of thought, do you know what, I've had enough. I'm gonna jack this in and quit it.
To be honest, there were moments like that every day that I was out there. I mean, the second morning, I couldn't even imagine finishing it. It was just so overwhelming, and we had heat in the 90s with high humidity. And then I wasn't able to sleep at all the first night. So I was going on basically, you know, almost 36 hours of just being awake in the very beginning of this thing. Yeah, I was nauseous the next morning. My IT band was hurting. But again, it just comes back to the people that I was surrounded with. You know, the quitting was never something that was said out loud. And I think that was really important to have those conversations beforehand, just knowing like, these are the goals and we're going to finish and work together to finish. So, but yeah, every day, especially towards the end, the last 4 or 5 days, it seemed like, I was out there for maybe 17 to 20 hours every day. And the last, 5-6 hours of each day, it was really hard. It was really challenging. Like we would go maybe a couple miles and then I'd just say, I gotta take a break, sit down, I'd lay down. And there were just points. I mean, every day I would say to my friend, like, I can't take another step. And then we'd like say, okay, well, take a break, lay down, catch your breath. I usually cry a little bit. And then it was just crazy because just get up and keep going. So that's the wild experience, still trying to process, of like the human body and what it's capable of doing. It feels surreal, and it's wild what happened out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm really interested in maybe just exploring that a little bit more. I mean, first of all, to kind of almost correct myself, because I'm sure there'll be people listening saying this. I mean, on a challenge like that, indeed on any running challenge, I mean, quit is just the wrong word anyway. It's never quitting. But obviously those thoughts do go through people's heads. The people you were with obviously made a huge difference, but at the end of the day, there was only one person out there running all of this every mile, and that was that was yourself. How do you, I know they helped, but how do you get over that moment like that and just keep yourself going? Because it's one final word away from a warm hotel room and a nice soft bed.
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of times it was just a very practical reason of we're 8 miles out road crossing. Nobody's coming to rescue us. But then also, I think the thing I kept coming back to was I would think about all the people that were supporting me and following the journey. We had a group chat where there's over 100 people in the one of those group apps, GroupMe, and my crew was sharing updates with them, and then friends were, 24 hours of the day are just putting in messages of support and words of encouragement. So a lot of times when I would get to that breaking point of like just having to sit down on a rock and get emotions out, I would pull my phone out and I'd start reading through those notes from friends. It was very emotional to do that. I get emotional thinking about it. It was just like, it was incredible. The community aspect of all this was really incredible.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think the support that everyone gets as runners, whatever sort of challenge they're getting, and I can see from you now that you're definitely sort of thinking about and reflecting on that. So that's fantastic. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that there was other reasons as well, because you were raising awareness and money for a couple of fantastic charities. Do you want to tell people about those again, and also how they kept you going on the trail?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I'm so glad you brought that up to talk about it. I was raising funds for the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, and every day I was thinking about the trail conference because they maintain all 358 miles of the long path. And it was especially an eye-opener. The first 100 miles, I since have learned that there's only like 4 or 5 people that maintain over 100 miles of trail. So they're really in need of more volunteers up there. So I'm really thankful that, the fundraiser, it seemed to have a pretty big reach. We raised over $5,000 for these 2 organizations. So just getting the word out about the trail conference, what they did. And I thought about them a lot, and just how these are the people who are going to come out and start repairing these trails after these storms that, we were trekking through. And then the other organization, Bigger Than the Trail, they provide cost-free therapy for anybody who needs it. And I benefited from that last year and have since stuck with that to just work through the mental health side of everything. And I thought about Bigger Than the Trail a lot, and just how this run really, I think, brought some attention to that organization and was able to raise funds. I know it's going to get people help that they need. So that was definitely a part of this whole experience, was those 2 organizations.
Cool. And how much have you managed to make so far? And also, I suppose, if people still want to back them, where can they go?
Yeah, total. Since the fundraiser started in the spring, is about $5,000 that's been raised. They're both still active, so you can I can send you the links for them. We could link it in the maybe the show notes. But yeah, there's two websites where you can put some donations up.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get them in there 100% if people want to go and stick a few pennies or dollars or whatever towards those two fantastic charities. Just thinking again back on the trails, I know one thing we spoke about quite a lot before was whether you'd be camping out or whether you might manage to
Oh,
find a few hotels and nice places to lay your head at night. How did that all turn out?
yeah, wow, that was a big turn of events. We ended up renting a 20-foot or 23-foot RV. And so most of the 9 days it was the RV, and then we'd have a couple more friends that were in another vehicle helping to support. So this RV was very convenient for me. I think it was inconvenient for the crew. It was a lot of work. I mean, we all really didn't know anything about RVs going into this. But you gotta dump and fill, and I don't even know all the terms that my friends had, those details they had to take care of. But yeah, we had this RV, so each night I was able to sleep maybe 3 hours or so. It was nice to have a bed to be able to do that. And there's a little kitchen in there that was great for supplying food and everything. So yeah, that's what we ended up doing. No camping or hotels. Bunch of dirt naps for sure throughout the whole thing. I got very cozy with the dirt throughout the long path.
Oh, bless you. Oh, well, big up to the support crew again, because the logistics of trying to get that RV to the right place, I'm sure there weren't always the correct places for them to be able to park up such a big vehicle on the trails and so on, and making sure you got to the right place each night. I imagine that's a huge operation in itself.
Yeah, it was. We actually had two situations where the police were called on us, believe it or not.
Wow.
We were parked understandably. Now looking back on it, somebody called us in for suspicious behavior because we were parked in front of a cemetery and it was like 1 a.m. or something. So the police came and were like, "What are you guys doing here?" I mean, I guess it was quite a sight to have an RV and an SUV in front of this little cemetery in the middle of nowhere.
What did they think you were doing?
I don't know, suspicious activities, which I guess it was suspicious to people who aren't involved in this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, that's an interesting one that I didn't expect expect
Yeah,
to go along. But I'm kind of going to replay some of the questions I asked you before and see how they turned out. And the other thing
yeah.
that we spoke a lot about was nutrition. And how did
Mm.
that manage to go? Did you manage to get enough food in you to keep you going? And I remember we spoke about stopping at like gas stations and stuff and just grabbing what you could there.
Yeah, man, the nutrition was all the credit goes to my crew, specifically my friend Dina Griffin. She's a sport dietitian. She's become a good friend. She came out, she was there for about 8 days of the whole experience, and it's just amazing to look back and see what she did. I mean, that she kept me on track with nutrition and hydration. We had crazy heat, we had torrential rain, I mean, sleep deprivation, and I didn't bonk one time. It was just amazing, just the constant flow of calories and keeping up with the electrolytes. We used the Scratch product. Well, it was called Super Fuel. Now it's called Super High Carb. That was a product we use a lot. There are a lot of calories that came from that. It's basically like liquid nutrition with some electrolytes. But yeah, I mean, smoothies, sandwiches, snacks, anything and everything. So it really went very well, and that's all credit to Dina and her work. We stuck with pretty much very similar things. Morning, it was usually a smoothie, and then taking like a sandwich or burrito for the first leg and trying to get into that. And then usually every single time I came back, I drank a protein shake that was like Orgain was the brand. I'd like to know how many I drank because it was a lot. It was a lot. But then, sandwiches, wraps, burritos, nuts, trying to do, I guess, like calorie dense was Dina's goal, to just keep the nutrition on track.
Oh, brilliant! Well, I'm glad that went as well. Sounded like it went absolutely perfectly to plan. So that's fantastic. A bit of a catch-all question, but I suppose was there anything else that kind of didn't go to plan? Because I'm guessing something like the long path must just throw up a whole host of unexpected issues along the way.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest physical challenge was just my feet were soaking wet from day one till the end. I mean, the first day we had it was high heat, so the humidity and the trails were just wet. They were wet from rain before, and then as we got into the second day, that's when those big storms came through the Northeast. It was like on the news with the amount of flooding and damage there was. So we were on trail when that was happening. And crew was just amazing. With every single time I came in, we changed socks and then would rotate shoes. The problem was, as soon as you got back out on trail, the trails were soaked, so your feet just immediately got wet and stayed wet. So that was probably, I think, the biggest challenge. And I told my friends, I'm like, this is a problem, it's unavoidable, we can't do anything about it, just got to try to do the best we can. Because I was getting frustrated, but I kept telling them, I'm not upset at you guys, I'm not upset at myself. It's just, it's a frustrating situation to have wet feet,
Yeah, because
hours a day.
yeah, but I mean, I'm guessing it's not just a problem of my feet are wet. That could mean they if they get cold, that can have problems. The wetness can cause extra blisters and all sorts of potential problems from that. It's not just simply, oh, my feet are wet.
Yeah. I've learned about, I don't think it went completely into like a diagnosis of trench foot, but it was, my feet were disgusting. They were just like, one of the strategies we used was I'd come in, take sock shoes off, and then we would douse my feet in hand sanitizer, because the alcohol content of the sanitizer would help draw the moisture out. And this is how you know you have good friends, is if they touch your feet. So I remember my friend Robin was like, your feet feel like wet plastic, like they're not human feet anymore. So it was challenging, because I think your feet are going to be sore anyway, but then to have them just waterlogged, it kind of bumped up that pain intensity. And by the end of the week I was dealing with some blisters. I never get blisters, so I know that was from just the conditions of the trails. But I mean, ultimately we were able to problem solve and work through it. But that was a physical challenge for sure.
Yeah. So we're getting into the glamorous part of trail running now. You've got wet feet, you've got blisters, you're climbing across logs, you're getting accosted by dogs, your body's exhausted, you're barely sleeping. Why on earth did you do this? What's so special about running across trails in the long path?
I know. And you asked before, like, were there moments that I was questioning, what are we doing out here? I remember when we were in Harriman State Park, and that was the section that was closed to the public and we were allowed to go through. And the trails were just flooded, running water. Everything was washed out, so it was very hard to navigate as well. And it was nighttime. So I was with a good friend, Maddie, and I remember just sitting on a rock saying, what? And then there were some expletives. What are we doing out here? Like, what do we do? Why am I doing this? And Matt reminded me of the things that I had said going into it. He brought in the community aspect of it with everybody who is involved in this, and a shared experience where a lot of people can come together, even if they're not physically here, just sharing in the journey. We talked about the two charities and the fundraising that was happening, and then also the personal goals I had of, like, just trying to find some inner strength. And I think that was one of the biggest things I found out there, was just tapping into this space that I don't think I've been connected with or knew about. And finding limits. I think every day there were, I know I told friends, like at the end of each day, what I mentioned before, I get to this point where I just say, I'm done. Like I can't go anymore. But then somehow we were able to keep going. So it was a wild experience.
Has that, I mean, it's perhaps too short a time span to really know as yet, but has that affected, has that sort of seeped into your everyday life? Do you come across situations that might have caused you issues before, or just been, oh God, that's a hard day, and you think, well, that's nothing. I've done the long path. I've managed to get over that log. I got past that dog. This is easy.
Yeah. I think not enough time has elapsed because I've just been focusing on recovery to be in more dumb situations where I could say those things. But I know for sure, I mean, that's going to come up time. I mean, like anything anybody's done. I mean, I think it's all relative, right? Like if you've never run before and then you do your first 5K, I think moving forward, you think back about, wow, like I couldn't run a mile, now I can do 3.1. And I think it's relative. I know people listening were probably like, well, that's extreme. You did like almost 400 miles. But I truly believe that. And I think everyone can relate on some level to that. So I think, yeah, it's just, there will be situations coming up where, whether it's on the trail or it's in life going through hard time, maybe with mental health or whatever, just being able to look back on those experiences. And sometimes I think I found it's not even a conscious thought where you're thinking back, oh, well, I did this on the trail and it was hard, so now I can do this. It's kind of like it's now just a part of who you are. And that's probably a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But it's an interesting thing how ultra running just, it like weaves itself into your life. And I think sometimes you don't even realize it till years later.
Yeah, I think that's really true, even from the little bit of running I've done. And you just kind of feel there's something in you that's maybe a little bit different from before, and you're able to get through a scenario that you didn't think. I mean, it doesn't make you invincible by any means, but you just, there's something a little bit different. And I've definitely spoken to plenty of other people on this podcast who will say, yeah, I've built resilience. I can take on situations that I would never have been able to do before I did this running. And as you quite rightly said, that can even be running around the block, running 5K. Yeah. It's all dependent on where you are in your running journey.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's what makes running so powerful, or whatever activity you're involved in. The space I'm involved in is trail, running, and hiking. And as a race director, I get to hear stories like that all the time. And that's like one of my favorite things about what I get to do, is like, you're at the finish line and folks will come up and share stories like that about how running has changed their life, or how the community has impacted who they are as a person. And it's amazing. It's powerful. And it's something I'm really thankful to be a part of. And I think the long path experience just really, really anchored that and solidified that in my life. So I'm thankful for that.
Oh, it's fantastic. And just to finish off, and I always sort of hate asking this question to people who've just done something incredible, because
I know what you're going to ask.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. You're probably going to go, I don't know, I'm relaxing.
You're going to ask what's next.
Yeah, what's next?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, the race this weekend, that was, every conversation I had, it would end with that question of, well, what are you going to do now? And it's a great question. There isn't like a bucket list of, okay, now this is the next thing, I'm going to immediately start working towards it. Looking ahead the next couple months, I'm supporting a friend who's doing 100, my friend Dina. So I'm doing that in September. Really, really looking forward to that, especially to give back, after she supported me so much at this long path. And then my race company, Sasquatch, we're doing our first 100-miler in September. So that is something that gets me so excited when I think about it, and just working towards preparing for that, thinking about, we have a lot of first timers who are going to try to get their first 100-miler. under their belts. So thinking about that and just being able to have that experience. Yeah, I think just over the years, I've seen how important it is to be on both sides, like to do these things yourself, but then to also make space for supporting other people. So that's definitely what's going on the next few months. And then we'll see. We'll see what calls, and who knows? We'll have to report back in the future.
Well, best of luck with helping those other people through what will be a fantastic achievement for all of them.
Yeah.
Good luck in whatever you do next, and most importantly, huge congratulations for getting yourself around those nearly 400 miles of the long path, and of course, thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast.
Thank you, Craig. This was awesome. Appreciate being here.
Thanks again to Kim Levinsky for joining us on the Running Tales podcast. What a fantastic story and what an incredible achievement. Please go and sponsor her if you can. All of the details are in our show notes, so go along and check those out. If you enjoyed this week's podcast, please go along to wherever you listen. Apple and Spotify, I know in particular, definitely do this. Give us a rating, 5 stars please, and give us a review if you can. It really does help other people to find the podcast and to hear stories like Kim's. If you don't know already, you can also find us on Substack, where we have a newsletter. That's at runningtales.substack.com. And on there, we often produce written versions of these podcasts and bespoke stories, such as our recent piece about 5 of the most unusual runs around the world. Clue, one of them was wife carrying. So go and have a look at that. Go and take part in that if you really fancy it. We also this week included the story of William McKim, and I want to just read a tiny little bit of our intro to that story to hopefully whet your appetite. The year was 1964, and William McKim, a middle distance runner from Kettering, was about to break the sub 4-minute barrier for a mile. In doing so, winning the city charity mile at London's Motspur Park in the progress, Bill would become only the 10th British and the 50th runner worldwide to break 4 minutes for the distance since the great Sir Roger Bannister first achieved that feat just 10 years earlier. You might be forgiven for thinking the 22-year-old Kettering Harrier had been nailed on to compete for Great Britain in the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo. The truth was more complicated, but at least proved one old adage true. Behind every great man is a great woman. So that's the story of William McKim, and you can go over to Substack and have a listen to that, runningtales.substack.com. Thanks again for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed Kim Levinsky's story. Leave us that rating, and we'll see you again next week for another Running Tale.